Welcome back to the Lap Down podcast with myself, Dan, and Alex, where we talk about Formula One races and Formula One racing drivers around Formula One racing tracks because we like Formula One. And I think actually a lot of those cease and desist letters have kind of stopped, or they don't really carry much weight behind them and no one's really talking about it, and all those podcasts still exist. So I'm just going to say it one more time. Formula One. How are you, Alex? How's your weekend? Did you enjoy the race?
I did enjoy the race. Well, there was a concern for a little bit, wasn't there? That I think in the first maybe 10, 12 laps of the race, everyone started going, oh, Baku. Oh, Baku, you're going to Baku it again. And then Baku got Piastri'd and Oscar saved everybody's day. And then the second 2/3 of the race were actually quite good and have also prompted a lot of things to talk about. A hell of a lot of things to talk about seem to come out of that race. We should say from the start that we've got Dan zooming in to the Sky Sports studio for this podcast. So apologies if Dan sounds a little bit worse than his usual crispy, rounded off self. He's a man living the Formula One life out on the road. So yes, there might be some oddities this week, so you'll have to bear with us on that. But we had too much to talk about.
Formula One powerhouse that is Northampton Town Centre. What a place. What a place. But yeah, you're right. It created a lot of talking points, and we have plenty of talking points to talk about. We want to talk about Williams. We want to talk about rear wings. We want to talk about DRS zones. We want to talk about commentators. We want to talk about Sainz and Perez. And we also want to just say thank you to anybody listening to the podcast because you're nice people. Anybody that stumbled across us through social media, because we've banged some views on TikTok lately. So welcome to the party. Welcome to being a lap down and being late to the... Because that's essentially what we are. We're basically the Sauber of the Formula One podcast world. We just turn up late. Our pit stops are slow. Sometimes we forget to put wheels on, and occasionally we'll start from the pit lane because we're a bit dozy like that. But we try hard,
why not?
And we still turn up.
Exactly. And we cycle sometimes. I don't cycle, but I feel like you cycle.
I dabbled
See,
a while ago.
I knew it. I'll be Joe then. That's fine. I'll be Joe and you can be Valtteri.
Done. Right. Where are we going to start? What would you like to kick us off with?
Look, I think it would be remiss of us not to start with Oscar because fair play to the bloke. He turned that race around from the clutches of being another Baku Borefest with a genuinely ridiculous send it down the inside, lick a stamp, and Danny Rickett up the middle of Charles Leclerc that I think we saw in the cool down room is so irritating because you hear really good bits and then evidently the director panics that they're about to swear, so it cuts away to a microphone that they seem to have put in the kitchen every week because it just seems to be people making a salad. But I think Charles kind of quite openly admitted, like, oh no, I didn't think you were coming. Like I didn't think you'd send it from that far back.
Yeah.
I broke normally, and then you just never got on the brakes. And it did seem like that. And you thought, oh God, that wall, that corner seems to come at you real quick. That sticks out a bit. But I mean, yeah, we'll start on the overtake. There's plenty to come after the overtake. But I mean, the kid's he's like a year and a half into Formula One. I say kid, he's like 24. But I mean, wow.
And who needs papaya rules? These are the papaya rules that we needed all along, and just get him out there. It was a hell of a send, wasn't it? It really was like the best of Daniel Ricciardo from 2021. Just absolute balls, maybe earlier than that, to be fair. Balls to the wall, kind of Australian, shoulders, elbows, everything out, and just some tiny little monogas man in a red car just kind of shitting himself as he went to turn into the corner. Oh fuck, there's an Australian there. It was good. And then we kind of proceeded to have a bit of a three-way, which turned into a four-way, didn't we, for a lot of the race. It was... I don't know. We'll talk about the DRS, won't we? But it was it was good because everybody was like, yeah, this is really... But actually, once Oscar got there, he just seemed to manage it really nicely.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. And that tyres had been his thing last year, hadn't they? He showed a lot of glimpses last year. That tell you what, this boy's got a little bit of something about him. But he was a little bit raw and that, he would maybe push the tyres too hard. Or in order to show that pace, he was just having to drive like I drive on F124 and do, 51 quali laps, and we'll work out, if there's problems, we'll work them out when we get there. But he seems to have massively overcome that. And yeah, he Whether or not, I saw a couple of people were talking about how if he hadn't have got past Charles there, Charles may have disappeared into the distance again. And then it was interesting, or they maybe read into that because Oscar didn't disappear into the distance. But I wonder a little bit whether that was just Oscar didn't need to go any faster than that. Like, if he knew that 0.6 around turn 16 was the number, okay, he ran it a little bit tight a few times, but there was no benefit to him being 4 seconds out in front than 0.8 seconds out in front if he felt comfortable with it. And I wonder if that's how he managed to hang on to it a little bit, that he wasn't in the dirty air. He wasn't actually having to push to stay 0.8 plus in front, and that's how he got home. But yeah, it was a lot of action with very little action, but that's quite good in a way.
Yeah, I think it always, when you've got three of them together, it always kind of makes it slightly more difficult, I think, in the fact that, and it was quoted in the commentary several times, but the person in second place is then constantly looking over their shoulder.
Yeah.
And their kind of attack on the car in front is kind of negated slightly by the fact that they're looking in their mirrors and trying to figure out what the person behind them's doing. There's a great chance that is what Oscar did. If it did, that is such a big brain play, because he's just literally done enough for more than half of a Grand Prix to get that car over the line in first place. It would be an anomaly. It would be an outlier if that is what he's done, and it would show some real maturity from as you called him, a kid, that we haven't seen yet. But that's not to say that isn't the case. And if that is the case, then dare I say that kind of shapes up Oscar Piastri to be probably a future world champion, assuming the performance in this McLaren stays, because he clearly does have the ruthlessness, that kind of mentality, that intelligence to be able to get the car over the line and win races. And probably why he's outscored everybody else on the grid since whenever the stat was.
I saw that. It was like over the last 7 races or something, he is winning.
Outrageous.
Yeah.
Genuinely outrageous. So
that's the second time now that we've seen a balls out move from Piastri in an overtake that was beautifully clean, is the other thing to point out. This was not a dive bomb in the sense of a dive bomb. This was not I'm coming and you can deal with the consequences of it regardless. And without wanting to upset the Max Verstappen fans, perhaps that's what Max did for a little while in some of the Hamilton battles of, well, I'm coming. We'll see. You crash into me if you want, but I'm gonna be there.
Yeah.
Both this and the overtake on Lando. Okay, that had different circumstances around it, but he's kept full control of the car on the track. Hasn't locked it up. Like, he's just so smooth and perfect, and just extracting every 0.1% around it. But I'd like to give a shout out as well, because I think it often goes unnoticed. Can we applaud his defensive skills as well? Because it's one thing to have a dive bomb ability, and again, I've used the word dive bomb when it wasn't, but it's one thing to have an overtaking skill, but his defense on the 4 or 5 genuine attempts that Charles shaped up to have, flawless. Again, put that car millimeter perfect within the rules. At no point so I listened to the F1 TV broadcast, and you've got Jolene Palmer there, who I think is actually very good on commentary. At no point did he go, he's getting a little bit close to the line now of how late or how aggressive or how much weaving. They didn't mention that at any point, which I think, if they're not even thinking that, that's a testament to how bang on that defense was as well.
Yeah, superb. But I've had enough talking about Oscar Piastri. We've noshed him off for 10 minutes, and I've had enough of listening to your Australian accent talk about your Australian little lover boy. So what I do want to talk about is the fact that McLaren are cheating. And that is the real reason why Oscar Piastri won the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. We've seen it. We've seen it on official sources like TikTok and Instagram from pages that I've never heard of before in my life, that have taken clips from the rear camera of the McLaren, which, if you have a slight persuasion towards a particular flavor of energy drinks, you can squint in such a way you can see the fact that when a car is driving 215 miles an hour down a straight, that some of these parts are a little bit movable and they're not actually just solid objects. Because I suspect if that was a solid lump, that rear wing, that car probably wouldn't be able to do 215 miles an hour down the straight. It's quite clever, though. if it is a bit sneaky by McLaren,
yeah,
it's bloody clever because kind of it's just doing enough, isn't it? But I'm a bit. Firstly, my thought is I love the fact that there's people watching the broadcast and go, fuck, I'm going to put that on TikTok because the FIA technical director is going to see that whilst he's taking a shit, because that's the only place anybody doom scrolls on TikTok. And he's going to go, bollocks, I've missed that. And then he's going to rush back to the office, like with toilet paper stuck to the bottom of his shoe.
Brian, I've seen a TikTok. Brian.
Another one. And anyway, he's going to get there and then McLaren are going to be guilty and they're going to have all their points disqualified and then Red Bull are going to win both of it and everybody on TikTok's going to be happy again. Or the other thing, like if there is a chance that this is a little bit kind of underhand from McLaren, it's bloody clever. But I do honestly think it's just a case of, like, I don't know how immovable these parts can be when you have a force, an air resistance of 200 plus mile an hour, slapping it in the face. I would imagine, but I'm not an expert, I don't know much about aerodynamics in Formula One, but I would imagine there's a chance that some things might move.
Yeah. And also, it's a piece that's designed to move, is the other thing to consider, is that it's not a side pod that is rigid, it's the flap, and the flap started opening in the corner. What I will say is there's two things from me. First of all, no, they're not cheating. Shut up. That's me speaking to the world and not you. That's me speaking to the internet. They're not cheating. They're doing Formula One properly, in that you've been given, here's your recipe book to design the car. Here's your ingredients that you must design it from. Make with it what you would like to make with it. And if everyone thought that they were going to make a quiche and McLaren made a pizza out of it, that's great, provided that they used the ingredients that they were allowed to use and that they kept it in the oven for as long as they were allowed to have it in the oven. Again, whether it's deliberate, I'm a little bit on the fence with you. I think there's maybe a little column A, a little column B, that it may well be that they pushed the limits on something which has had an unintended consequence. It's a little bit like when, do you remember, it might have been Mexico, where the Ferrari got like a dimple in its nose and everyone was like, oh, fuck, what have they found? What's this? And it's like, oh, no, we forgot to put a cover back on. So that's just the vinyl wrap pressing in because there should be a hard piece behind it and we forgot to put it in. Yeah. I did see something, and I can't remember the source, and so it's a massive citation needed, and we're very good at these thoughts. But
I might have seen something somewhere about something that may or may not be marginally relevant to what we might be talking about.
Correct.
Over to you.
Apparently, the area that is moving on the McLaren, so it is that for people that haven't seen it, God knows how you're listening to this podcast, but you haven't seen what's going on with this wing. It is essentially the left and right bottom corner of the DRS flap, under load down the straight when DRS isn't open, just curls up a little bit right on the corners, and you can see a little bit of daylight that you could probably fit a pencil through. And apparently, that's not a testing area under the regulations. That is not one of the areas where it has to meet certain guidelines. And in that way, as you said, bloody well done. That's bloody clever if you meant to do it, because you had someone sit in a room and go, sweet, what rules do I have to play by? And how can I get as close to the edge of those rules as possible without going over it? How much difference does it realistically make? I don't know. Apparently McLaren had the lowest DRS benefit in Baku of all the teams. Red Bull, I think, were strongest, and Ferrari were something like 15% stronger than they were last year or something like that in terms of DRS benefit. If it's illegal, it's going to come out and be found out quite quickly by, God forbid, the people whose job it is to decide these things and scrutiny of these things to be illegal, and they'll be told to take it off the car. And if it was illegal, we would already know, because I mean, you saw what happened with so many flaws and stuff where these random tests and all of a sudden it happens to be the car that we were suspicious of got randomly tested. It's obviously fine. Whether it's legal, different story. I very confidently say that it's not illegal. It's also kind of the point. Well done, lads, if that was deliberate.
Yeah, hats off. Yep. And plus as well, I mean, they're not going to get a huge DRS benefit if their rear wing opens halfway down the straight anyway, because they're only going to gain 50%, aren't they? Because they're cheating. So good for them, and good for you, McLaren. I'm proud of you. I'm pleased for you. You've done very, very well for yourselves. Williams, Shall we talk
Yes.
about Williams? Because they had good weekends in
Yes.
Azerbaijan. Also, like Azerbaijan and Formula One, I know they've been there for ages, but it's not really the number one kind of destination around the world that you'd expect to see a Formula One Grand Prix, is it?
No. If you are to believe Ted's Notebook, which is where I go for a lot of my information and opinion, apparently it's a very popular Grand Prix destination because Baku's not too hard to get to or too expensive to get to from a lot of places. So for fans, It's quite a cool flyaway Grand Prix destination because Baku's somewhere quite different to go on your holidays. And I don't think tickets to the Grand Prix are silly. I don't think getting to Baku is silly. It's quite cool that we go to these different places. You know, I would argue again, and it's that debate if we don't race in Africa anywhere, and Africa's quite a big country with quite a lot of people and quite a lot of countries.
It's a bigger
Maybe we should race in Africa. It's a continent, isn't it? I said country, I think. But it's, I'm going to need a citation on that. But it's, you know, I've got no ill will against Baku.
Nope.
But it is a bit random. I can't think of anything else that I know about Azerbaijan except for the fact that Baku is the capital and they have a Grand Prix there and there's a castle. And I think it's on the Caspian Sea.
Yeah, I think you can get a boat across it because I saw a race across the world once and they went.
And I only know it's on the Caspian Sea because at the start of every session, generally Crofty, as the helicopter flies over, goes, "On the shores of the Caspian Sea, we're ready to go racing in Baku." So that's how I know my geography.
Anyway, Williams,
well done, Williams. It's a WDW, and that's across the board as well. That's both garages. You know, that was. As far as weekends go for them, that's a dub for the dub boys, that one.
Huge. If Williams did weekends, it would look much like a layover in Azerbaijan on your way to Singapore, having just been coming out, having just had a weekend away in Europe. It was fantastic. Really, really good to see. It always feels like Alex Albon goes well on these circuits that require a bit of tyre management. He seems to be one of the few that can really whisper these tyres around. And that opening stint that took him deep into the Grand Prix, gave him track position over a few of his rivals, and then came out on some real decent freshies with like a big benefit of a massive overcut, is what they call it. Played out massively, and he's done it before, and he's done it in several places. He seems to be a bit of a wizard when it comes to the tyre management, particularly around street circuits, and it's great for Williams. It's great for James Vowles to be kind of picking up these points, and obviously they're starting to look like absolute geniuses by turfing out Logan Sargent back to IndyCar and bringing in your mate, Franco Colapinto.
Which we got complimented, by the way, for our pronunciation of Colapinto.
Did we? I checked the analytics on TikTok the other day. For the last month, we've had like 25% views from Argentina.
Team, hello. Should we be the official F1 podcast of Argentina? Can we declare ourselves that?
Well, I mean, we might be a top 10. We're probably
Why
not
not
official.
Let's do that. Genuinely, though, I would like to propose that we adopt Franco Colapinto as the Lapdown podcast's official favourite driver. Because
I like that.
I don't have a bad word to say about the bloke. In both on track and off track, I've seen little bits of him. He was kicking about with a T. I don't know if you saw this. Franco Colapinto was cutting about the paddock with a personalised engraved mug and a metal reusable straw with his own initials on it, drinking, I think it's like, is it yerba mate or something like that, which is like a tea. And he was describing about how he doesn't want it sweet. He wants the bitter one. He can't have the sugar. I love this guy. What a bloke. And also drives body quick. Like, what more could you want from Franco Colapinto than tea and points?
He's great. He's great. It will be short-lived, though, because unless he suddenly turns into a Spaniard called Carlos with a flowing lock of hair, we aren't going to talk about him for much more than the next 7 races. So,
no.
But yeah, good for Franco. Great to see him getting some points. Great weekend for the Williams team. All because Carlos Sainz crashed into Sergio Perez deliberately with an eye on the fact that he's going to be driving that Williams next year. And then, therefore, the Williams got more points than what they would have done, which means they'll get more money because they'll finish further up the Constructors' Championship. So this whole little James Vowles kind of, oh yeah, we're going to smash it for 2026. It's all coming to plan because he's got something on these people, and he has the ability to make Carlos Sainz crash Sergio Perez deliberately out of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix to ruin their chances for the podiums so that Williams got more points in the Constructors.
There
Facts.
It is.
Proven by science. Done.
It's pronounced signs, I think is how it's pronounced. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, look, we'll slide on to that. I just, before we finish on our boy, the official driver of the show, Franco Colapinto, he's now got more points than Logan Sargent got in his career, which is all we need to say about that. And he's got 4 times as many points as Logan Sargent managed in his entire career. So, yeah, there you go. Look, the crash. Okay.
Yeah.
The crash. It's just a straight-up racing incident by 2 blokes that didn't realise or panicked that they were suddenly in the situation they were in, I think. Because I don't think either of them suddenly expected to actually be having to fight for the final step on the podium. And I think they kind of both flinched and went, oh shit. And then neither of them had driven next to or near another car for like an hour. And I think they just both forgot that they weren't doing quali laps anymore and that they actually had to pay attention.
That's how I saw it. They both looked like they just kind of gently converged on one another as they exited turn 2, didn't they? And then they both wanted the middle of the circuit. The track does kind of slightly kind of bend round to the left, doesn't it? I think out on the exit of that corner.
Yeah, the racing line is sort of across the track, I think, in a drifty way.
But let's be honest, it's wide enough to probably put 3 Formula One cars down side by side if you had to. And they chose that they wanted to be on the same piece of tarmac at the same time, and that doesn't work. So
and then the same piece of concrete at the same time as well.
Yeah, no, that bit they executed that perfectly. To be fair,
yes, they really did
that well. But yeah, just a bit dozy, I think, from both of them.
Yeah. It was also the smallest little touch, and this is what's so odd sometimes with Formula One. It was actually the same thing with what sent Yuki out of the race and essentially ruined Lance Stroll's weekend as well, is that they had a little kiss going down into a corner.
Lance Stroll being Lance Stroll, but
yeah. But they had a little kiss into a corner that essentially meant that Yuki had no side pod anymore, and gave Lance a puncture. And it was a little bit the same with Sainz and Perez, because they sort of just bumped tyres, but at the absolute worst place at the worst time. So it just, I think you heard genuine confusion in Carlos Sainz's voice that he didn't know, did the car break? Like, I don't think he knew at that point necessarily that he had crashed into, well, he didn't crash into necessarily, had a coming together with Perez. I think he was just genuinely confused of like, is this another Max Verstappen at Baku? Like, the tyre has just exploded? Yep. Like, why did my car just turn left? It was James Vowles is the answer. But it's just a straight up racing incident, isn't it? And I know that team, Sainz will tell you that it was Checo's fault. He turned right, and Team Checo will tell you that Carlos Sainz turns left. I think neither of them turned. They were just pointing the wrong way.
That was the problem.
Yeah.
If either of them had turned, I think there was a chance that wouldn't have happened. But the fact that they both kind of just careered into one another. And the other thing as well, as you said, it was a small touch. But these things move very, very quickly.
Correct.
And they are by nature designed to fall apart. So these kind of innocuous incidents end up looking incredibly worse than what they are, because from nowhere you've got cars coming out of a corner, which you wouldn't probably take at much more than 20 mile an hour in your road car. They've probably taken it at 80 to 100. Then they've kind of got together a bit, and then you've got wheels coming off and wings and carbon fiber everywhere. But yeah, it does make it look a little bit more dramatic than maybe what it was. So, but yeah, I mean, dozy, great for Williams though. Well done. Well done.
Superb for Williams. Superb for Franco Colapinto, the official driver of the Lap Down podcast as well. So, the last thing I'll say as well, which is maybe a little bit harsh, right? And I feel like we do pile on Checo Perez. So the first thing I'll say is fair play, Checo. You were having a decent weekend to that point, and you were. I mean, I know that he is sort of the king of Baku. I think he's got the best record by far of any of the current grid at Baku. And you were having another good one. Fourth would still have been a good one. And You were the car behind that could see, and I know it all happens quickly, and I know that you're concentrating and that you want third and all the rest of it. You were the one that could have most easily made sure that you didn't both end up scraping your cars along a wall attached to each other by just going boop and just a little twitch to the left, and then you could have come on the radio and gone, he pushed me to the side, he didn't give me space, whatever. But just a little boop, is all you needed to do that probably wouldn't have cost you much time, and you could have just tried to send it down the next corner. But it is a racing incident. That's not me putting blame. That's me trying to find a solution.
No, it is, yeah.
Had we have wanted to have avoided this.
No.
But
that's absolute
racing.
Confirmation that you hate Sergio Perez, and it was completely Sergio Perez's fault. That is from the official FIA racing director of the Lap Down podcast, Alex Berry, and he has blamed Sergio Perez. So
yeah, there we go. We've picked the official driver of the podcast tonight in Franco Colapinto, and we've picked the official enemy of the podcast, Checo Perez. We've got a nemesis now.
The more you know. I've got two more things on my list. I don't know whether you've got... What else have you got? Have you got anything else to go through?
I'd just like to talk about... I'd like to give a shout out to DRS at Baku. Because I think DRS cops a lot of flack. But DRS at Baku... You just
want to talk about McLaren again, don't you?
No, because I actually want to talk about Charles. DRS at Baku worked perfectly and was the perfect example of DRS at its best. Because... it kept Charles in the hunt. It allowed him to make 3, 4, 5 genuine overtaking attempts on the car in front. It did not let him piss past the car in front halfway down the straight just because he wanted to. And I think people forget that sometimes, that you having DRS is not a gift of the overtake within 3 laps. That's not what it's there for. So the fact that it was good enough to have commentators for 15 laps, 20 laps, staring at a tenth of a second on a timing chart going, right, if that number at the start there is a 5, we're in serious business. If that number is a 6, and bearing in mind we're talking tenths of a second, he probably isn't going to get it done. Perfect. Because he's got... what is it, 6 miles or whatever the track is? He's got the other 5.6 miles to make up that tenth of a second if he would like to then have more advantage of DRS down the back straight to help him just finish the job. And in that way, perfect. Yeah, good. And speaking of commentary, there's nothing I particularly want to dwell on because things change at the end of the day, and I'm not going to be critical of people because I think that's completely unfair, and I'd be slightly hypocritical with some of the things that I receive and that I do for a living. But we've had in Formula One Martin Brundle and David Croft, for what feels like a decade now, and it probably is a decade, if not longer. And clearly they're both getting to a stage now, and David Crofty has been one that's kind of said, I want to calm down a little bit. There's more races than ever. I've got family at home. I want to spend time, and completely fine and understandable. So this weekend we had Harry and Karun on the Sky F1 broadcast. And that's obviously what we're listening to. We're in the UK. You listen to Sky TV. And they probably did fine. They probably did okay. But you get so used to listening to the voices that you enjoy listening to, or not even necessarily enjoy listening to, but it feels like a safe space because you know what you're coming to expect. You know what the personalities are like. You know what the joke's going to be. You know kind of what the level of excitement's going to be. Can Formula One sustain, or can Sky TV at least, which does get broadcast around a lot of the world, can they sustain having multiple commentary partnerships and setups over the course of a season? It's not like football on Sky or cricket that you have so many different games and so many different fixtures that you probably do need a stable of people to kind of work through. But for 24 weekends of the year, which is a lot, like bearing in mind it's a 52 week calendar and you've got half of that absorbed by Formula One Grand Prix, do you need to have a commentary team and a presentation team that is going to be kind of there for the course of the season, and then you potentially make changes at the end of it? Or can you be a bit fluid and just kind of pick and choose people as and when they do and don't want to do things? I think So I listened to the F1 TV broadcast for this Grand Prix. So I had it's Alex Jakes, isn't it? And Jolyon Palmer. And that was a nice change of pace. And I do find Jolyon Palmer very insightful to listen to. And I think he does a very good job of giving you the Brundle role of he's done this, albeit slightly in different time frames. And you get that different sense. Had Harry Benjamin had been on with Martin, I think I probably would have listened to the Sky broadcast because my love for Martin Brundle trumps anything else. And a little bit like what you said, it's very, we're very comfortable with being used to Crofty. So this is not, and I'll make that really clear, in any way anything against Harry Benjamin. He's obviously a very accomplished commentator. You don't put people in that role if they're not. I know he's done it for a long time. And to be fair, BBC 5 Live radio listeners might actually go, sweet, here we go. Harry is my comfort. I'm used to that. I'm going to follow him to the telly. So this is not who's better than who. This is who we're more used to than others. I would say that Sky maybe made a misstep in making that such a seismic switch, and by not keeping one of the gang together. I know they had Ted, and I think they had, and I've forgotten her name now, the lovely Northern Irish woman who does a great job. Bernie. Love Bernie, by the way. She's the best thing that's been added to that broadcast in such a long time, even though I've forgotten her name. But yeah, had they have had Brundle there, he could have maybe just carried that and just smoothed over the cracks a little bit, that it wasn't quite so jarring, that you felt like you had a B team there. It would have been a late substitution style feeling. Because I don't gel excellently with Karun's punditry, which again is not saying that he is a good, bad commentator, anything indifferent. It's, gelling with. But yeah,
that's because you do come to expect, and you do feel safe. It's similar to obviously it's the end of the Grand Tour, isn't it? And Top Gear, and as we've known it with Clarkson, Hammond, and May. And it would be 1 week for no reason whatsoever. They'd be off to Botswana, and they'd just go, well, the good news is, Jeremy's not around this week, so actually it's Jonathan Ross, Richard Hammond, and James May. And you'd go, yeah, but I don't want to watch this.
Yeah.
Because that isn't the person that makes this interesting for me. But that said, things are going to transition, and I'm sure there will come a point. But I don't know. I was just curious, really, to hear what your thoughts were.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know there's a right or wrong answer. And as you say, they all have their own qualities. It might just have been a bit of a Band-Aid being ripped off.
And there's going to be a change. It's going to happen. Crofty is not going to be, I would guess, Crofty's not going to be commentating Formula One in 2030, for example.
No.
We're going to have different commentators by that point. I think there's a great chance that Sky try and poach Jakes or Palmer or someone, because they've probably got a little bit more money to spend than F1 on their own in-house setup. So I think there will be a transition in that way, possibly. But it's going to happen. It's just how maybe Sky, as you say, with ripping the Band-Aid, how carefully they do that. Dan, we've got another race this weekend, and then we've got 4 weeks off.
We do, and I have good news about this weekend.
Oh!
Good news is Kevin Magnussen is back.
Here he comes.
Better news is that Kevin Magnussen now has no penalty points on his driving license. And better news, he only has 7 races in which he can fuck around and collect as many penalty points as he'd like to without facing any form of ban or punishment between now and the end of his Formula One career. So I don't know what he's going to get up to, but he's going to get up to some shit over the course of the next 7 weeks. And we are going to have a great time talking about it on the podcast. He might drive people off the circuit. He might drive really slowly around particular sections of races. He might just kind of stop in the pit lane just for shits and giggles, just to back somebody else up. So Hülkenberg can go through and drive past and get some more points. He might just drive into the side of someone. He might just kind of go, you know what, I've never liked you, Esteban Ocon, so I'm just going to drive into the side of you because, you know what, I'm not here next year anyway, not my problem. So it's great news for Kevin Magnussen, great news for Formula One, and I'm just excited to see what Kevin Magnussen gets up to. I don't really care it's in Singapore, I don't care who wins, I don't care who does well, but K-Mag's back and he's got fresh pants on.
If you're Andrea, what's his name? What's it? Because they've changed the same team principal name and they just changed like 2 letters. Is it Andrea Stella now, I think?
Yes, could be.
If you're him, right? No, if you're Zach Brown, right, I'm picking the phone up on an unknown number. I'm going to Tesco, right? And I'm buying a burner phone, right, on a £2 SIM with a brand new number. And I'm ringing Kevin. And I'm putting a fake voice on, so I sound a little bit, ironically, like Bernie Collins. And
nice.
I am
do that
saying,
for us now?
And certainly not. And I'm saying, Kevin, hi, it's Zook Green here. How would you fancy perhaps messing around with the bloke in the number 1? And I'll give you like a whole merch pack of papaya gear. You can have a gilet, you can have a hoodie. The retail value of it's about £14,000 and there's 8 items in it. But if you just want to use some of those points on that chat with the number 1 on the front, we'd really appreciate that. You never heard from me. I'm going to go throw my phone in a reservoir.
But they've got a lake out in front of their office. So just swing it straight out there. Yeah. And if he doesn't take the papaya merch, just give him the keys to a McLaren Senna. I think that would probably do okay.
Yeah.
It'd be worth it.
I can make him one.
But I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. No, I think that he's going to get up to some shenanigans, isn't he? Because Haas are in a genuine fight now as well. So Haas have got 29 World Championship points, right? They are 5 points behind RB, who frankly have looked absolute toilet in the last however many Grand Prix. Why have they got Danny Rick out there for 50 laps on one set of hard tyres and then they just pitted him on the... What are you doing? Okay, Yuki had an unfortunate incident. You didn't then just have to go, we don't fancy it with Daniel anymore. I mean, Jesus. But you got Williams behind them on 16 with official driver of the show, Franco Colapinto, dominating. That there's a good chance, actually, they might overtake Mercedes by the end of the year with the talent that Franco Colapinto's got. So,
and particularly if Carlos keeps taking other cars out of the race.
If Carlos keeps playing his part. But you've got Haas in there in a little bit of a fight above and below that's worth many pounds. You know, that's worth some money that I can see them trying to orchestrate as many single points as possible. And they've only got to overcome 5 points on RB in, 7 races. That if you can orchestrate a single point per race, all of your employees just got 500 quid more at Christmas, and you know you've as a team you've just got a load more. So I can see them doing some funky stuff. Whether they go quite to your Mario Kart levels of funky, yet to be seen. But I can see them doing some funky stuff.
It's unlikely.
Last thing then on Singapore, because we've praised DRS so much that F1 went, well, if you like DRS so much, why don't you have more of it? We've now got 4 DRS zones in Singapore. I don't really know where, because most of it just appears to be right angle turns again. But I think if you're not turning at a right angle, you've got the flap open this weekend. Whether or not the 4 DRS zones actually survive FP1, because I think we've had 3 or 4 tracks in the past suggest 4 zones, and then by the time we get to Saturday, I've gone, no. Thoughts on a 4th DRS zone, and pretty much any straight is flappy town.
DRS was a success last weekend, and if I like anything, I like recency bias. So good for DRS. Let's have some of it. Yeah,
there you go. We're getting it. We're getting all of it. We're getting all of it.
Give me the DRS.
There it is. DRS it up. Right then, that's Formula One covered in every aspect for this week. We've got a race this weekend, which I think this weekend could well be title deciding in one sense or another, because I think it's a track that should suit the McLaren. We've seen before, generally doesn't suit the Red Bull, and that was when the Red Bull was at its best, let alone current state of the Red Bull. So I can see there being a swing of some description this weekend, and I think we'll go into the autumn break knowing a little bit more about what December's going to look like. But Dan, where can they find you on the internet on your data?
At Dan Jads on the internet. You can come and find me do cricketing things. I haven't quite started doing Formula One things on there yet, but you never know. Keep an open mind.
Might happen. If you want to come watch me play games, you can watch that at twitch.tv/HeyLookAtAlex. We'll be back with a couple of episodes over the autumn break when Dan is back in a property that he actually has permanent access to. But in the meantime, if you'd like to send us anything, you can lapdownpod@gmail.com, or just keep, commenting and whatever on the Tick and Talks and socials and stuff like that, because we love seeing what you guys think. And we'll see you post-sweaty Singapore to talk about what Kevin Magnussen's been up to and Franco Colapinto.
Wonderful as always. See ya.
Bye.